The same damn thing, day in, day out. Mike gets up, goes to work, comes home, eats dinner, watches TV, goes to bed. We barely even talk anymore. Don't get me wrong, he's a good guy, but it's like the spark is gone. The whole thing feels more like a routine than a marriage. I guess that's the way things settle for some people, but I never thought I'd be one of them. I used to crave excitement, new places, new people, just something to shake things up. I used to be the one dragging Mike to parties, trying to sign us up for that weekend tango class. Now, it's like I can't find that energy inside me anymore. Then I met Ryan. He was at Sarah's company Christmas party, some client or something. We started chatting, and my God, the guy was electric. Funny, charming, and he actually seemed interested in what I had to say. I hadn't felt like that in ages. We exchanged numbers, and before I knew it, we were texting every day. It was all so innocent at first, jokes, talking about work, that kind of stuff. He always asked me how my day was, if there was anything I needed help with, not like Mike, who just kind of assumed everything was fine unless I started yelling. But I don't know, it quickly turned into more. We'd meet for coffee during my lunch break, and those coffees turned into long walks in the park. I started making ridiculous excuses to get out of the house. Meeting with a client, girls' night with Sarah, even helping my mom with her computer. I'd cringe while telling Mike these lies, but the shame never stuck. Mike never suspected a thing. He's so trusting. Sometimes it makes me even sicker to think about what I'm doing. The guilt would hit me sometimes, watching Mike go about his boring routine, not knowing I was thinking about Ryan the whole time. But then Ryan would text me something sweet, or we'd meet up and that guilt would just melt away. I was hooked. I felt alive for the first time in years, like I was somebody else, a more exciting version of myself. Plus, I told myself I was being careful. I deleted messages, covered my tracks. I was a pro at lying to Mike by this point. He didn't deserve it, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. I found myself thinking about Ryan constantly. At work, doing laundry, even when making dinner with Mike, Ryan was the only thing on my mind. It was this buzzing energy inside me, all tingly and exciting. When I pictured Mike, I just felt nothing, just dull. He didn't make my heart race or my palms sweat like Ryan did. Mike was reliable, safe, and incredibly boring. I used to find comfort in the routine with Mike, but now it was suffocating. I started getting irritated by every little thing. The way he chewed, how he always watched the same sports shows, that dumb mug he always had his coffee in. Ryan was the opposite. Refined, interesting, everything Mike wasn't. I couldn't believe it took me this long to realize I deserved more than just, okay, maybe it felt like I deserved more than Mike, to be honest. I started making more of an effort with my appearance. New clothes, my hair done more often, all with the excuse that I was feeling blah and needed a pick-me-up. It was working. Ryan would compliment me, telling me how fantastic I looked. Those compliments felt like shots of some kind of drug straight to my brain. Mike didn't notice the change in me, or if he did, he didn't say anything. Maybe that made it worse. He wasn't even trying anymore. It felt like a silent insult. Truth is, I think part of me wanted to get caught. It was like this twisted game I was playing with myself. I left a receipt for some fancy restaurant I'd never been to in the cup holder of Mike's car, hoping he'd find it. I'd accidentally leave texts from Ryan open on my phone when Mike was in the room. One time, I even wore a necklace Ryan gave me straight home from one of our meetups. How did I not get caught? I still don't know. Deep down, I knew I couldn't keep this up forever. Maybe I wanted the weight of it to crush me, to feel that punishment I knew I deserved. But some other part of me, the reckless part, thrived on the danger and the lies. He almost caught me last week. An email from Ryan popped up on my phone right when Mike walked into the kitchen. I deleted it in a flash, playing it off like a stupid spam thing, but I saw that flicker of suspicion in his eyes. It fueled me. I started getting bolder, taking more risks. It was a high unlike anything I'd ever felt, and horrifyingly, I think I was starting to get addicted to that feeling. The bracelet was beautiful, thin, delicate, with a tiny little heart charm that Ryan claimed was a symbol of our connection. It was way too fancy, and it screamed, "I shouldn't be wearing this!" I hid it in my jewelry box under a bunch of old necklaces, but every morning I'd put it on. It was this secret thrill, a dangerous reminder of what I was doing, like I had this double life I could just take on and off with a flick of my wrist. But that tiny little charm was like a ticking time bomb just waiting to go off. Then it happened. I was grabbing coffee with Emily, one of my oldest friends, the kind you tell everything to. We were catching up, and she starts talking about how she ran into me and some guy at the mall a few days back. You didn't see me. You guys looked cozy. My heart must have stopped, and I swear all the color drained from my face. I sputtered some crap about how it must have been someone else. How could she say that? Whatever I could to deflect those knowing eyes of hers. After the coffee, I went straight home and threw that damn bracelet in the trash. But the damage was done. The nightmares started. Vivid, terrifying dreams of Mike catching me red-handed. The disgusted look on his face. The screams, the accusations. They were so real that I'd wake up shaking, and it took forever to convince myself it was just a dream. My days were a haze of exhaustion and constant paranoia. Every time Mike looked at me, I'd wonder if he knew, if he was just waiting to spring this trap on me. To make matters worse, Ryan started getting more demanding. At first it was compliments and sweet texts, but then it was pointed questions about my home life, suggestions that I ditch Mike. We could be so happy together if he wasn't in the way. That's when I started to see him for what he was, not this romantic hero that saved me from my boring life, but just another guy using me. On top of that, Mike, bless his clueless heart, started trying harder. He'd bring me flowers, suggest little date nights, and pay more attention to how I looked. All it did was make me feel even sicker with guilt. There was this good, kind man trying to hold on to me while I slipped further and further away. The worse I felt about myself, the more I clung to Ryan as a lifeline. It was a messed up cycle that I couldn't see a way out of. The lies grew bolder. It was a game now, testing how far I could push my luck. I'd leave my phone face down on the kitchen counter, daring Mike to glance at the notifications flashing across the screen. I invented increasingly outlandish excuses, late-night meetings, last-minute errands. It got to the point where I could barely remember the truth from all the stories I'd made up. The bolder I got, the hotter that secret thrill became. Seeing Mike's trusting face day after day made it all the more twisted, like I was feeding on his cluelessness. Then came the work conference, the perfect alibi. My colleagues waved me off to Chicago while Ryan booked us a luxurious hotel room downtown, where we spent the next 3 days barely coming up for air. Being with him, I could pretend for a few fleeting hours that none of the rest existed. But as soon as we returned and the lies began again, the panic always caught up with me. My new friend Jessica suddenly became my lifeline. Suppose conference calls turned into long chats with Ryan, explained to Mike as catching up with Jessica. Each lie became a brick in a wall I was building around myself, trapping me inside a mess of my own making. With each new secret, my body seemed to bear the weight a little heavier. The panic attacks started like a wildfire I desperately tried to contain. My chest would tighten, breaths would catch, and I'd feel this wave of dizziness come over me. I'd excuse myself from dinner with a sudden headache or bolt from staff meetings claiming to be sick. Each escape to sob in private fueled a fresh dose of shame. It was like my body was begging me to stop the madness. But that twisted part of me, the high-chasing, reckless part, always won in the end. One sleepless night, haunted by the wreckage that was my life, I found myself on the computer scrolling through divorce lawyer websites. All the cold, practical jargon, assets, custody, alimony, felt like a punch to the gut. The guilt gnawed at me, relentless, but the alternative, confessing to Mike, felt like a leap into complete darkness. Fear had me in a chokehold. How in the world did I get here? It wasn't a sudden change, but a slow, toxic slide into a twisted reality. Now I was face to face with the monster I had created. I slammed the laptop closed, the sound echoing in the silent house. Sleep evaded me as I trembled in the dark, a coward and a villain in my own story. My mind buzzed with fantasies. A little apartment just for me, a fresh start with Ryan. Visions of holding hands in public, cozy dinners cooked together without the weight of lies. I'd build this image in my head, letting it play out like some cheesy rom-com. Ryan would get me, make me feel alive like Mike never could. I'd tell myself this was my escape, the life I was always meant to have. But the fantasy always shattered against reality. One afternoon at the mall, I saw a couple, maybe in their 60s, holding hands and laughing. Something about their ease with each other, that shared history etched in their smiles, hit me like a truck. The fantasy of my new life crumbled. All I felt was a deep pang of regret. I was destroying my chance at that kind of simple happiness for the cheap rush of sneaking around with Ryan. Back home, everything about Mike started to annoy me. The way he cleared his throat, how he slurped his coffee, it was like a switch had flipped in me, turning familiarity into revulsion. I neglected chores, dirty dishes piled up, laundry in wrinkled heaps. The meals I used to make became takeout boxes and silent minutes spent scrolling on my phone at opposite ends of the table. The rare times we did talk, I'd snap at him for the most trivial things. Mike tried to reach out to ask what was wrong, and my stomach would churn with shame-laced resentment. It wasn't even about love for Ryan anymore, at least not real love. It was the twisted rush of the forbidden, the thrill of living two lives, of pulling off the perfect lie. Each night with Ryan wasn't romantic. It was fuel, another hit of that high that kept me trapped in this sick cycle. I'd spend lavishly on clothes for our dates, trips I couldn't afford, passing it off as stress relief to myself. I deserved it, right? I was the one putting in all the effort, keeping this twisted, thrilling mess going. It became this drug I relied on, my own twisted escape. Even when the guilt clawed at me, reminding me of the good man I was betraying, I couldn't stop. I'd become addicted to the thrill of danger, to the feeling of playing a role so far from who I once was. Maybe deep down this was how I could punish myself for what I was doing. And worst of all, a dark corner of my mind couldn't help but wonder just how far things would go before they finally imploded. Hey guys, if you're loving the content, show us some support with a like and subscribe. Helps us keep the good stuff coming your way. Sometimes tiny cracks of truth would surface. Staring at Mike over breakfast, the words, "I've been having an affair," would flash across my mind. The confession would dangle just on the tip of my tongue, a desperate urge to clear this poison eating me alive. But then comes the fear, shattering the life we built, the shame, the hurt in Mike's eyes I know I wouldn't be able to bear. So the urge would recede, buried again beneath layers of deceit. The fights were getting worse, nasty. Every conversation felt like a minefield. Once, while packing for work, I snapped at Mike about a wrinkled shirt. "Why can't you ever do anything right?" The look on his face was a mix of frustration and bewilderment, the look of someone questioning who I had become. I stormed out the door, guilt twisting my insides, but that addictive part of me would justify it, telling myself that he deserved it for being so clueless. A new tactic appeared in my arsenal: manipulation. I started preying on Mike's lingering insecurities. A passing comment about my toned arms from a male coworker was spun into a tale about how Mike needed to shape up, how I should have married someone more fit in the first place. Each jab chipped away at him, distracting his attention away from my own failings as his wife. I knew it was cruel, but I was drowning, and my desperation made me do horrible things. At the store one day, I saw a watch. It wasn't fancy, just something sturdy and practical, something Mike would love. I remembered the excited gleam in his eyes whenever I'd surprise him with small gifts. A wave of sadness hit me hard, not for my actions, but for what was lost. Our connection, our ease, the simple joy I'd robbed us of. The memory vanished as quickly as it came, smothered underneath justifications and the dull throb of the thrilling alternative. My sister kept asking what was wrong. "You seem distant," she'd say. My response was always a practiced deflection. "Work, you know how it is, just stressed." Lies piled upon lies, building an impossibly tall tower of secrets that was bound to come crashing down sooner or later. I convinced myself it wouldn't be my choice that ended it. My heart nearly stopped when I saw her at the cafe, Sarah. Old college roommate, the gossipy one, the kind whose eyes missed nothing. I hadn't seen or spoken to her in years. A million panicked thoughts ran through my head. Did she see me with Ryan? Did she know anything? I managed a strained greeting, trying to act casual as she rattled on about work and her boyfriend. But on the inside, all the tightly wound wires of my secret life were buzzing, threatening to short-circuit at any moment. Later that night, I lay awake, my mind spinning. If Sarah saw something, how long until it got back to Mike? The fear was a live thing inside me, feeding a new level of paranoia that latched on and refused to let go. That's when a desperate plan started to take form. What if I brought Ryan into the lie, a visiting colleague, someone believable and most importantly, controllable? He could pose for a work lunch, maybe even some casual drinks with me and Mike to ease any suspicion. With this twisted plan brewing in my head, Ryan's usually exciting texts became pressure points. "When are we going to make this a real thing? How long are you going to keep me hidden like this?" I was getting a glimpse of the neediness I had originally found attractive in him. It was becoming suffocating. All I wanted him to do was cooperate and help me dig myself out of this mess. The fear, it grew into this constant, unsettling hum. I'd swear I was being followed on the way to work, jump at every unexpected sound on the street. Sleep disappeared altogether. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced someone was in the house, watching. The affair, the lies, they were turning me into a paranoid, twitchy wreck, and I knew it was only a matter of time before this whole thing exploded around me. Then it happened. Texting Ryan first thing in the morning while Mike was still sleeping beside me, a mix-up. A sweet nothing meant for my lover ended up on Mike's phone. I wanted to throw up. What felt like hours of waiting for the inevitable fallout were the worst of my life. Had he seen it? Was he waiting to confront me? The fear had a chokehold on me, making it impossible to concentrate on work, impossible to go home and face this thing that would be out in the open now, hanging between us like a death sentence. The walk home felt like 1,000 miles. Each step was heavier, my mind a frantic scramble of excuses. Maybe Mike missed the text, he always rushed in the mornings. Maybe he saw it and just didn't react yet. That glimmer of hope died hard as I turned the key in the lock and entered the house. Mike was in the kitchen, his back turned. He didn't look mad, more like confused, hurt. Before I could say anything, he turned. "I saw it," he choked out, his voice barely above a whisper. Panic flared up inside me. What was it? The text? How much had he seen? All the lies I'd prepared in advance were useless scraps in the wreckage of this very real moment. It's not what you think, I stammered, my voice feeble. It was a prank, a joke with my sister, I swear. Mike looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my heart drop like a stone. It wasn't rage, just utter disbelief, a shattering of the world he thought he knew. The lies just kept falling out of my mouth, each more tangled than the last. A convoluted story about a bet, a misdirected text, anything I could grasp at to claw my way back from total ruin. In the corner of my mind, I noticed an uneasiness about Ryan. His texts were too persistent all day. He wasn't buying my excuse for canceling our rendezvous. I started questioning his devotion. What would he do if he found out I was caught? This was no longer a thrilling game for him. He had his own neck to protect. He could turn on me, make it all worse. Mike sat at the kitchen table, head buried in his hands. He seemed smaller somehow, defeated. I wanted to reach out, comfort him, beg for forgiveness, but the words felt like lead on my tongue, bound by the fear of complete destruction, of losing everything I had built, even if it was based on deceit. The truth, the confession, it was a lifeline hanging just above my head, and I couldn't bring myself to reach for it. That night, as he slept beside me, I cried silent tears. Shame, fear, and utter exhaustion were a suffocating weight. I knew Mike was trying. Flowers appeared on the kitchen counter, an offer for a date night, a trembling attempt to pick up the broken pieces. But each kind gesture felt like a knife to my heart. This good man deserved the truth, and I was a coward trapped by my own selfish decisions. The paranoia escalated with each passing day. Every phone call was Mike finding proof. Every time he checked his phone, I braced for the explosion. I became a master at deciphering his moods, the smallest frown setting off sirens in my head. There was no peace, no quiet, only a waiting game for the day I'd be forced to finally pay for what I'd done. Mike changed. No screaming, no smashing dishes like on TV. Instead, it was a cold silence, a heavy distance. Meals were eaten across from each other in tense quiet. He'd stopped making eye contact, barely responding when I spoke. Seeing the utter disappointment etched on his face was more agonizing than any outburst could have been. My pathetic attempts at normal conversations fell into an empty void. He'd stare through me like I wasn't even there. The home we built together had turned into a prison, me trapped in a cage of my own making. Shame burned me from the inside out. I wanted to scream that I was sorry, beg for forgiveness. But the words died in my throat, replaced by waves of nausea, the sinking realization that I may have destroyed everything. Every kindness from Mike was another twist of the knife. His attempts at reconciliation were reminders of how irrevocably broken I had become. The fallout spread beyond our home. Emily called, her voice laced with concern and disappointment. "I saw Mike at the store. He looks awful. Are you okay?" My lies came easily now. "We're just stressed. Work has been crazy." As I hung up, the disgust I felt for myself made me want to crawl out of my own skin. My support system was slowly crumbling, and I knew I deserved it. Ryan, ever the opportunist, sensed my vulnerability. Suddenly, he was calling multiple times a day, demanding I leave Mike immediately. His sweet nothings were replaced by accusations. He accused me of playing games, threatened to out me to Mike himself. It was horrifying to see his true colors, not the romantic savior I'd invented, but a selfish, desperate man trying to salvage something for himself. The arguments with Mike escalated. I'd lash out, trying to bait him into a real reaction. Anything was better than this frozen, miserable existence. "You never cared about me anyway," I'd scream, desperate to make him hurt at least a fraction of what he was feeling. One night, he finally snapped. "If you want me gone so badly, just say it." His voice was low and filled with a resigned kind of hurt that stopped me cold. This was it. There was no going back, no elaborate lies to save me this time. The consequences of my actions were laid bare. Faced with the choice to salvage what was left of my life or continue this destructive spiral, something in me shifted. My voice small, barely audible, I choked out, "Don't leave." A confession wasn't what I uttered, but in some small way, maybe it was the beginning of acknowledging the truth, even to myself. And that tiny admission terrified me more than any